The one Dryland programming secret is what I'm going to be covering in this lesson. So make sure you listen, right? Secret in parentheses. What I mean by that is if I could really narrow it down to one thing that I've seen success come from in the Dryland programs that I've written throughout the years, all different type of athletes where it crossed all those different parameters, whether it's a new beginner or someone chasing a world record, an Olympic gold medal. If we look at these 5 movement categories, what I think the secret really falls down to specifically for swimmers being successful on land and carrying that into the water is making sure the ratios between push and pull and squat and hinge are at least a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is if we have a session that has exercises, and let's say we did it real simple, where we just had each circuit have 5 exercises, so 1 for each movement category. So that means in that workout, you're gonna have 2 exercises for push, 2 exercises for pull, 2 for squat, 2 for hinge. We're in perfect 1-to-1 ratio there. So for every 1 push exercise, there's 1 pull exercise. For every 1 squat, there's 1 hinge. We'll get to a little bit more of the details of that at the end of the lesson here. But in a nutshell, it's making sure that you're not doing a ton of push-ups and no pull-ups, or a ton of lunges and no RDLs. So making sure you're in at least a 1-to-1 ratio. Even better, I've found, is I started experimenting and going onto the other end of it and having more pulls than pushes in terms of exercises from that category in the workout, or more hinges than squats. And I saw that the results actually got better and continued to get better as we moved that ratio over to a 1 to 2, or even 1 to 3 sometimes. And so you can play around with that, but what I would absolutely not do is go the other way on that ratio. So I wouldn't have 2 push-ups, two pushing exercises to 1 pull exercise, or especially 3 pushes to 1 pull. And the same things with squats. So pulls and hinges, more the better. I have yet to find I could overprogram from that standpoint. But as far as pushes and squats, I found that you run into a little bit of trouble, whether it's from shoulders, knees, or back, that it just didn't seem to add up. So at least a 1-to-1, but sometimes you could go 1 to 2, and I haven't really seen a downside yet in terms of more pulling and more hinging. Now here's an example, because this could seem overwhelming if you think, oh, well, okay, if I have it perfect at 1-to-1, I don't want to mess it up, but maybe you want to try that 1 to 2 ratio. So here's the example workout that we've been talking about so far in this module. And all I have to do is substitute 2 exercises out, 2 total out of the 10, to go from a 1-1 ratio to a 1-2. So again, this might be a time where you want to print off the slides so that you can look at it. But if you look at that first circuit, I believe that's the one I changed. Yes. So the first circuit, all I do is I take out the push-up and the split squat, and I put in another pull exercise and another hinge exercise. And that's all I did. And now I have a 1 to 2 ratio in terms of pushing and pulling and squatting and hinging. So again, all I did, each of these circuits, there's a push, pull, hinge, squat, brace. All I did for one of the circuits is I just pulled out the pull, pulled out the push, and I pulled out the squat, and I substituted for a pull and a hinge, and that's just in that first circuit that you can see. And now I moved the ratio from a 1-to-1 push-pull, squat, hinge to a 1 to 2 ratio. So now I have more pulling, more hinging overall in the workouts. Now, there is a little bit of a nuance to this, because in terms of tracking the number, big picture, I would just look at exercises done. And yes, if you go back here, you could see that for the rows, we went from 10 push-ups to only 5 rows. But also, the push-ups were body weight and the rows are with barbell. And I'm hoping that, it's going to be a pretty good weight with that barbell, maybe even close to body weight with that. So even if that's not exactly lined up, I first look at the exercises done. Then I would look at the volume, and then maybe factor in the intensity. So sometimes it might not look as clean as possible in terms of, if you're doing 10 push-ups and that's body weight, but then you substitute it with a pull exercise, but you're only doing 5 because it's a barbell exercise and you're loading it up pretty good. Just focus on the number of exercises, number one. And then if you feel you really need to keep getting into the nitty gritty, then start looking at the volume and intensity and try to factor that into the ratio. But my whole motto is try to keep it simple as possible, and then that allows you to coach more on the floor and to engage with the athletes and not think about having to spend 3 hours writing a 45-minute dryland session. So I try to keep it simple. I think if you just focus on the number of exercises, you're going to fall in line with the ratio and you're not really going to run into trouble, but you can always go down a little bit deeper and focus on the volume in terms of reps, sets, and then even the intensity in terms of the weight that they're pushing and the load of it. So that's my one secret for dryland programming success. Keep those ratios at least 1-to-1 and maybe play around with a 1-to-2, going more on those pull and hinges.